"Stop, he's my husband," shouted the young Apache woman as the chief banished the rancher. The hot sun burned down on the wide, open plains of the southwest, casting long shadows over the red rocks and dry grass. The wind whispered softly through the tall sagebrush, carrying the faint scent of earth and distant mountains. In this quiet, wild land, life was not easy. For the Apache people, the desert was home, a place that demanded respect and courage. For outsiders, it could be dangerous if one did not understand its ways. Thomas Carter rode slowly along the dusty trail, his horse's hooves kicking up small clouds of dirt. He was a young rancher from the East, strong and ambitious, with a determination that sometimes made him reckless. Thomas had heard stories about the land and the people who lived there. Some told him it was full of opportunity, rich with cattle grazing grounds and open pastures. Others warned him about the Apache, fierce and proud, who would defend their land without hesitation. He did not know yet which path awaited him, but he was eager to find out. As he rode, Thomas noticed the outline of a small village in the distance. Smoke curled from low wooden huts, and children's laughter floated through the air. Women moved carefully with baskets, tending to small gardens, while men sharpened tools or checked traps for animals. The village seemed calm, but Thomas felt the watchful eyes of the people on him, even from afar. He slowed his horse and looked around, feeling both excitement and tension. In the village, Nayeli, a young Apache woman, watched from behind a cluster of tall reeds near the edge of the settlement. She had dark, thoughtful eyes and a quiet strength that made her presence noticeable even when she tried to stay hidden. Nayeli had grown up listening to stories of her people's courage, learning the ways of the land, the language of the animals, and the importance of keeping her people safe. She had seen outsiders before, travelers and merchants, but Thomas seemed different. There was a confidence in him that did not belong to most strangers. She narrowed her eyes, unsure whether to trust him or be ready for conflict. Thomas approached the village slowly, speaking softly to calm his horse. "I come in peace," he called out, hoping the words would be understood. He carried goods to trade, blankets, tools, and a few tins of sugar, but he also carried the arrogance of someone used to getting what he wanted. He thought he could simply walk into the village, make friends, and continue his trade. What he did not realize was that every step on Apache land had meaning, and every action was watched closely. The chief of the village, a tall man named Ahiok, observed from a distance. He had lived many years in the desert, knowing both its generosity and its dangers. His face was lined with age and wisdom, and his eyes held a depth that came from years of protecting his people. Ahiok had seen many outsiders pass by, some respectful, others not. He recognized the careful balance needed to keep his tribe safe and their ways honored. When he saw Thomas approaching, he motioned to the younger men to prepare quietly but without alarm. There was no reason to act hastily, yet vigilance was always necessary. Nayeli stepped closer, her curiosity stronger than her caution. She had been watching Thomas for a while now. There was something in his movements, his careful way of handling the horse, the careful placement of his packs, that suggested he might not be dangerous, at least not in the way many outsiders were. She decided to stay hidden but keep observing, her heart beating with a mix of fear and fascination. Thomas reached the edge of the village, stopping his horse near a small clearing. He tied the reins carefully and began unpacking the goods he had brought. His hands moved skillfully, displaying a level of experience that suggested he was used to work with care. He called out again, trying to sound friendly. "I am Thomas Carter. I hope to trade with your people. I mean no harm." The villagers remained cautious, whispering among themselves. They had heard travelers say similar words before, only to cause trouble once they were inside the village. Ahiok stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. He was silent for a moment, assessing the man, then spoke with a deep, calm voice. "Why have you come here, stranger?" His words were careful, measured, but carried the authority of someone who had lived through many conflicts. Thomas bowed his head slightly, showing respect. "I bring goods for trade," he replied. "Blankets, tools, sugar, things you might need. I seek only fair trade and nothing more." Ahioke studied him for a long time. "Trade is allowed, but you must follow our ways," the chief said finally. "No one may take more than what is needed. No one may disrespect the land or the people. Do you understand?" Thomas nodded eagerly. "I understand completely," he said, though he did not yet fully grasp what that meant. He was a man used to following his own rules, and learning new ones, especially ones so different from his own life, would be a challenge. Naomi felt a strange pull in her chest. She was drawn to the young rancher's courage and determination, but she knew that the land and her people must always come first. She decided to stay close enough to watch, to ensure that he would not make a mistake that could cost him, or her people, their safety. Over the next few hours, Thomas attempted to trade with the villagers. Some were curious, others wary. Children peeked from behind huts, giggling quietly, while women whispered to one another, discussing whether the stranger could be trusted. Thomas offered the blankets first, unrolling them carefully on the ground. The colors were bright and unlike anything the villagers had seen. Some elders inspected the fabrics, nodding slowly at the quality. Next, he presented tools, iron knives, small hammers, and sharp axes. These items were practical, and the Apache people recognized their usefulness. A few villagers exchanged glances, acknowledging that some trade could be beneficial. Thomas smiled, sensing that his efforts were beginning to bear fruit. But despite the apparent success, a tension remained. Thomas did not yet understand the customs of the Apache fully. He accidentally touched one of the sacred artifacts kept by the village elders, and their faces grew serious. Ahioke stepped forward again, his tone firm. "Respect the things that belong to the tribe," he warned. Thomas froze, realizing his mistake. He bowed his head, apologizing sincerely, though he felt a sting of embarrassment. "I am sorry. I did not know." Naomi's eyes softened slightly, sensing his sincerity. She stepped closer, though still careful not to draw too much attention. She could see that Thomas truly meant no harm, and she felt a small spark of hope that perhaps this stranger could learn and respect her people if given the chance. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the village, Thomas prepared to leave, hoping that the trade had gone well enough to be remembered positively. Yet he could not shake the feeling that he had only glimpsed the surface of a deeper, more complex world, one that required patience, humility, and understanding. Naomi remained near the edge of the village, watching as he rode off slowly. She felt a mix of relief and curiosity, wondering what this man's presence might mean for the future. The desert was vast and unpredictable, but something about Thomas's arrival hinted that change was coming, though no one could yet know whether it would bring harmony or conflict. As the evening settled in, the village returned to its quiet rhythm. The children played near the fire, the women tended to cooking, and the elders gathered to discuss the day. Naomi remained thoughtful, replaying every movement of the stranger in her mind. She could not yet understand the role he would play in their lives, but she knew one thing clearly: this encounter would not be easily forgotten. The desert night arrived, cool and calm, filled with the sounds of wind through the rocks and distant howls of animals. Under the stars, Naomi made a silent promise to herself. She would watch, she would learn, and she would protect her people, no matter what. And she would not forget the stranger who had dared to enter their world with courage and hope, even if the path ahead was uncertain. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the desert, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and orange. The village was already awake, the sounds of daily life filling the air, women drawing water from a nearby stream, children chasing each other across the dusty paths, and men preparing for the day's work. Naeli moved quietly among them, her mind still occupied with thoughts of the stranger, Thomas Carter. She had watched him leave the day before and wondered what kind of man he really was. Naeli's curiosity was not simply born from intrigue, it was born from responsibility. As a member of her tribe, she had a duty to protect her people and their land. She had been trained to notice the smallest details, how a person held themselves, how their eyes moved, even the way they spoke. Something about Thomas was unusual. He was strong and confident, but not cruel. He seemed willing to learn, even if he did not fully understand the customs and traditions of the Apache people. By mid-morning, news reached the village that Thomas had returned, bringing with him more goods for trade. Some villagers whispered nervously. They remembered how easily outsiders could bring trouble, intentionally or by accident. Naeli, however, felt a sense of cautious hope. She decided to watch closely, staying hidden as Thomas approached. This time he rode slower, almost as if he was aware of the delicate balance between respect and intrusion. When Thomas reached the village again, Ahioke, the chief, was already waiting. His tall, commanding presence was impossible to ignore, and every villager paused to observe how the encounter would unfold. Thomas dismounted his horse carefully and bowed respectfully to the chief. "Good morning, Chief Ahioke," he said. "I have brought more goods for trade. I hope to earn your trust." Ahioke's eyes studied him, sharp and assessing. "Trust is earned, not given," he said calmly. "Yesterday you made mistakes. Today we will see if you have learned from them." His words were not harsh but carried weight, the kind that reminded Thomas that he was in a world where respect and understanding mattered more than wealth or strength. Thomas nodded, fully aware of the lesson. "I understand, Chief. I will follow your rules and respect your ways," he said earnestly. He began to unload his goods, taking extra care not to touch anything that might be sacred or delicate. Villagers began to approach, cautiously inspecting the blankets, tools, and small trinkets he offered. Some nodded quietly, seeing the quality of what he had brought, while others remained skeptical. Among them, Naeli observed closely, analyzing Thomas's every move. She noticed that he seemed genuinely careful this time. There was no hint of arrogance in his actions, no rush to impress anyone. He was different from other outsiders she had seen. He listened, he watched, and he adapted. Naeli's thoughts drifted to the strange pull she had felt yesterday, a feeling that she could not yet name. It was not fear, and it was not dislike. It was curiosity, mixed with caution, and something softer that made her heart beat faster when he was near. While Thomas was busy arranging his goods, a dispute arose nearby. A young boy had accidentally knocked over a basket of corn, and an older villager scolded him sharply. The boy's fear was clear, and Thomas stepped closer, unsure how to react. Naeli, noticing this, moved quickly to intervene. "He did not mean harm," she said firmly, addressing both the villager and Thomas. Her voice carried authority, and everyone paused. The chief's eyes followed her, observing how she managed the situation. Thomas looked at Naeli with surprise. He had expected caution, even hostility, but not kindness and guidance. "Thank you," he said quietly, bowing his head slightly. Naeli only nodded, understanding that actions often spoke louder than words. She helped the boy pick up the spilled corn and whispered a reminder to be careful. The boy nodded and ran off, his embarrassment softened by her gentle tone. As the morning passed, Thomas continued to interact with the villagers, learning the proper ways to present his goods and speak to the elders. He asked questions politely, listened intently, and tried to understand the customs that governed this community. Some villagers began to warm slightly to him, seeing that he was different from the reckless outsiders who had come before. Others remained cautious, knowing that a single mistake could undo any progress. Ahioke called for a council meeting in the central hut. Thomas was invited to observe but not to speak unless spoken to directly. The council discussed the boundaries of their land, the responsibilities of their people, and the importance of outsiders respecting their traditions. Thomas listened silently, absorbing every word. He realized that the strength of this tribe did not come from weapons or numbers, but from unity, wisdom, and a deep connection to the land. During the meeting, Naeli sat close to the chief, her eyes occasionally flicking toward Thomas. She could see that he was genuinely trying to understand, but she also noticed moments when he struggled to hide frustration or impatience. Teaching a stranger the ways of her people was not easy, and she knew that mistakes could have consequences. Still, there was something about him that gave her hope. Perhaps he could learn, and perhaps he could be trusted, not yet fully, but enough to watch carefully. After the meeting, Thomas approached Naeli quietly. "I want to learn," he said earnestly. "I do not want to cause trouble. Please tell me how I can show respect." Naeli considered his words carefully. She had seen many outsiders make promises they could not keep, but Thomas's tone was different. There was honesty in his voice and a willingness to change. "Listen and watch," she said finally. "Learn our ways and you will understand. But remember, respect is not just in words. It is in every action, every step you take on this land." Thomas nodded, absorbing her guidance. He began to follow her instructions, walking carefully through the village, observing customs and asking questions when appropriate. Naeli noticed his effort and felt a quiet pride. He was not perfect, but he was trying. In her eyes, that was the first step toward trust. The days passed slowly, with Thomas spending more time among the villagers. He helped with small chores, repaired broken tools, and shared knowledge about farming techniques that could be useful. The villagers, seeing his dedication, began to soften toward him. Some even laughed at his mistakes, gently correcting him without anger. Naeli watched all of this, her curiosity growing stronger with each passing day. She found herself thinking about him even when he was not around, a feeling that both excited and confused her. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples, Naeli and Thomas found themselves alone near the stream. The water reflected the colors of the sky, and the desert grew quiet, filled only with the soft rustling of leaves and the distant calls of animals. "You have been very patient with me," Thomas said, his voice low. "I know I make mistakes, but I want to understand your people, your life." Naeli looked at him carefully, seeing the honesty in his eyes. "Patience is necessary," she replied. "But understanding takes more than words. It takes respect, observation, and sometimes humility." "Are you willing to do that?" Thomas nodded. "I am. I want to learn everything I can." For a moment, the air was filled with a quiet understanding. Naeli realized that this man, so different from anyone she had met, could be a bridge between her world and the outside. She also realized that her feelings for him were growing, though she had to keep them in check. Her loyalty to her people came first always. As night fell and stars appeared in the sky, the village settled into calm. Naeli returned to her hut, her mind alive with thoughts. Thomas Carter had arrived as a stranger, but he was no longer merely an outsider. He was someone who could learn, someone who could change, and someone who had stirred feelings within her she had not expected. The desert night was quiet, but it was not empty. Change was coming, slowly and carefully, and the first seeds of connection had been planted. Naeli knew that the days ahead would test both her courage and her judgment. She had a duty to her people, but she also had a heart that was beginning to see beyond the boundaries of the tribe. And so, under the wide, starry sky, life continued in the Apache village. The stranger remained, learning and adapting, while Naeli watched and guided, aware that every moment mattered. In the silence of the desert, a story was beginning, a story of trust, courage, and the slow, careful blending of two very different worlds. The days grew warmer, and the desert sun shone relentlessly over the village. Thomas Carter had settled into a careful routine, learning from Naeli and observing the daily life of the Apache people. He had gained some trust among the villagers, yet tension lingered like a quiet shadow. Outsiders were not easily accepted, and even though Thomas had shown respect, one wrong move could undo all progress. One morning, a serious issue arose that threatened the fragile balance. A small herd of Thomas's cattle had wandered close to a sacred area of the tribe, a place where hunting and grazing were strictly forbidden. The elders noticed tracks near the riverbed and immediately called for the chief's attention. Ahioke, with his commanding presence, gathered his advisors and marched toward the intruders, his face solemn. Thomas, seeing the movement from afar, realized what had happened. His heart sank. He had not meant to disrespect the land or the tribe, but the mistake was serious. The sacred areas were deeply significant to the Apache, tied to history, spirits, and survival. Any encroachment, even accidental, could be seen as a major offense. He approached Naeli quickly. I didn't realize the cattle were wandering, he said, worry and guilt mixing in his voice. I will fix it, I promise. Naeli looked at him with concern. You have caused trouble without meaning to, but the tribe may see this as disrespect. You must act carefully. Follow me. She led him toward the gathering of elders, her expression firm but calm. The elders were already assembled, murmuring quietly among themselves. When they saw Thomas approaching, some eyes narrowed. Whispers spread. He does not understand. He must learn. Can he be trusted? Naeli stepped forward, standing slightly in front of Thomas. Her presence brought a pause to the crowd. She had grown in authority in the eyes of the tribe. Her words carried weight. Chief Ahioke looked at Thomas, his gaze steady and unyielding. You have brought your cattle near sacred land, he said. This is not a small mistake. Our land is not to be used carelessly. Why should you not be banished for this? Thomas swallowed hard, feeling the full weight of the situation. Chief Ahioke, I did not mean to cause harm. I am sorry. I will move the cattle immediately and I will ensure it never happens again, he said earnestly. The elders murmured, unconvinced. Some were angry, some disappointed. They had seen outsiders speak words of apology before but act differently afterward. Thomas understood the seriousness of their judgment. One wrong action could cost him his life, his place in the village, or the fragile trust he had begun to build. Naeli stepped closer, her voice clear and strong. Chief Ahioke, he did not intend to disrespect the land. He is learning. He has shown patience, effort, and care. I can vouch for him. The words surprised many villagers. Naeli rarely spoke so openly in matters involving outsiders, yet her declaration carried weight. The chief's gaze turned to Naeli, evaluating her carefully. You speak for him, he asked, his voice calm but firm. Do you understand that your words could influence the decision of the tribe? I do, Naeli replied without hesitation. But I know his heart and he respects our people. Please, consider his effort before judgment. A tense silence fell over the group. The elders and villagers watched both Thomas and Naeli, unsure what the chief would decide. They respected Naeli, yet the mistake Thomas had made could not be ignored lightly. Thomas, feeling a mix of relief and fear, bowed his head. Thank you, Naeli. I am grateful for your guidance, he said quietly, knowing that her support might save him from banishment. Ahioke considered carefully. The chief understood the danger of allowing an outsider to act without accountability, but he also respected honesty and sincerity. You have made a mistake, he said finally, and it could have caused serious harm. This is not the first time outsiders have crossed our boundaries without care. Yet your actions since arrival show effort. You are learning, but learning alone is not enough. Respect must be proven. Thomas nodded, his hands gripping the edges of his coat. I understand, Chief. I will prove it in any way you ask. The tension, however, did not fully fade. Another elder spoke, voice heavy with concern. Effort does not erase mistake. The tribe's safety and sacred traditions are paramount. How do we know this will not happen again? Before Thomas could respond, Naeli raised her voice, her tone both firm and urgent. "Stop! He is my husband!" The words rang out across the village like thunder. Every villager froze, staring in shock. The air seemed to hold its breath. Thomas looked at Naeli in astonishment, his eyes wide. The elders and chiefs stared, trying to process what she had just declared. Whispers spread quickly. "Husband, she is married to him." Naeli did not falter. Her eyes were steady, her voice unwavering. "I have made my choice," she said. "He has my loyalty and respect. His heart is true and he means no harm. I stand by him." Ahioke's expression remained calm but unreadable. He had faced many challenges in his life, and he knew that love and loyalty were forces not easily ignored. He took a long moment to consider the situation, looking at both Thomas and Naeli. The declaration was unusual, even unprecedented, yet it could not be dismissed lightly. The village erupted into quiet discussion. Some were shocked by Naeli's bravery. Others worried that her choice could disrupt the balance of their traditions. Yet all eyes turned to the chief, awaiting his judgment. Finally, Ahioke spoke, his voice measured and deliberate. "Your words are bold, Naeli. You claim this man as your husband and vouch for his heart. I see courage in your declaration and I see truth in his actions. But the mistake remains and the land must be respected." Thomas bowed his head, accepting the chief's authority. "I will correct my error, chief. I will move the cattle immediately and follow any instruction you give to restore respect." Ahioke nodded. "Then you will leave this place for now. You may return only with full permission. This is the way to honor our land and our people." Naeli's eyes filled with both relief and concern. She knew that Thomas would have to leave temporarily, but she also understood that the chief's decision had saved him from a harsher fate. She stepped closer to Thomas, taking his hand. "We will find a way," she whispered. "Do not lose hope." Thomas squeezed her hand, gratitude and affection mixing in his expression. "Thank you, Naeli. I will follow your guidance. I will honor this land and your people." As Thomas gathered his belongings and prepared to leave, the villagers watched silently. Some nodded in approval of Naeli's courage, while others remained cautious. The desert wind carried the sound of Thomas's horse moving away, blending with the rustle of leaves and the distant cries of animals. That evening, Naeli returned to her hut, her mind heavy with thought. She had taken a risk, speaking openly for Thomas, and it had changed the course of the day. She reflected on her feelings, the mix of duty, loyalty, and something deeper that drew her to him. The desert around her seemed quiet, almost waiting, as if it understood the unfolding story. Meanwhile, Thomas rode slowly along the desert trail, careful to avoid sacred areas and sensitive lands. He thought about the chief's words, the elder's caution, and Naeli's bravery. Every step was a reminder that respect and understanding were more important than ambition or pride. He realized that true courage was not only in action, but in learning to listen, observe, and adapt to a world far different from his own. As night fell, Thomas made camp under a wide sky filled with stars. He watched the constellations, thinking of the village and Naeli. The desert was vast and lonely, yet he felt a strange sense of connection. He understood now that his journey was not only about trade or exploration, it was about learning, respect, and earning trust, step by step. Back in the village, Naeli watched the stars from her doorway, thinking of Thomas's departure. She felt both relief and anticipation. She had stood up for someone she believed in, and in doing so, she had shown courage to her people and herself. But she also knew that the days ahead would not be easy. Thomas's return would bring new challenges, and their bond, though strong, would be tested by traditions, expectations, and the unpredictable desert. And so, under the quiet, star-filled sky, both the young Apache woman and the young rancher faced the consequences of their choices. One had spoken boldly to protect someone she trusted, and the other had learned a valuable lesson about respect, humility, and the fragile balance of trust. Their paths were intertwined now, and though the future was uncertain, The first step toward understanding and connection had been taken. The desert night held a sense of calm, yet beneath it, a story was unfolding, one of courage, love, and the delicate dance between two worlds so different, yet bound together by choice, loyalty, and the strength of the human heart. The morning sun rose gently over the desert, spilling light across the village and casting long shadows on the dusty paths. The day after the confrontation, the village moved with cautious energy. The elders had met early, discussing the events of the previous day, and Chief Ahiok had called a meeting to address the situation with Thomas Carter. Though the young rancher had been temporarily banished, the chief understood that the matter required careful resolution. Naeli, her presence respected by the villagers, stood nearby, watching as preparations were made. Thomas had camped on the edge of the desert, within sight of the village but far enough to respect the chief's command. He spent the morning tending to his horse, reflecting on the lessons he had learned. The weight of the previous day's events pressed heavily on him, yet he felt a sense of determination. He knew he had to earn the tribe's trust fully if he wanted to continue his journey and maintain the fragile bond he had formed with Naeli. As the villagers gathered in the central meeting hut, Ahiok's voice carried calm authority. We must consider not only the actions of the man but the words of Naeli. She has spoken boldly in his defense. This is not a decision to be made lightly. The elders nodded, their expressions serious. The matter was complex. It involved respect for the tribe's land, protection of sacred areas, and recognition of individual courage and loyalty. Naeli stepped forward, her voice clear and firm. Chief, I understand the importance of our traditions and the need to protect our land. Thomas made a mistake, yes, but he has also shown effort and respect since he arrived. I believe he deserves a chance to make amends and prove himself. He has my trust, and I stand by him. The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of her words settling over the assembly. The elders considered the situation carefully. The declaration was unusual, yet it revealed something essential: loyalty, honesty, and courage. These were qualities the tribe had valued for generations. Naeli's words could not be dismissed, and neither could the mistake that had brought them here. Finally, Ahiok spoke, his tone steady and deliberate. Very well. He may return, but he must follow the rules set by the tribe. He will move the cattle immediately, restore the land, and follow our customs without question. Any further mistake will result in permanent banishment. Do you understand? Thomas, standing nearby, bowed his head deeply. I understand, Chief. I will follow your rules completely. I will honor your land, your people, and your traditions. The chief nodded once, a signal that the decision had been made. The elders murmured among themselves, discussing the conditions, while Naeli remained close to Thomas, offering quiet support. She knew the road ahead would not be easy, but this was the first step toward reconciliation. Thomas spent the next few hours carefully moving his cattle away from the sacred areas. He worked with patience and attention, guided by Naeli and the village men who knew the land well. Each animal was led gently, ensuring that none wandered near forbidden grounds. The process was slow and demanding, but Thomas approached it with humility, understanding that respect could not be rushed. Meanwhile, Naeli watched closely, stepping in when needed to guide him without taking over. She explained the significance of certain areas, the history behind their protection, and the proper ways to interact with the land. Thomas listened attentively, absorbing every detail. He realized that the Apache people's connection to the land was deeper than he had imagined. It was not simply ownership. It was stewardship, responsibility, and reverence passed down through generations. By mid-afternoon, the cattle were safely relocated, and the sacred areas were untouched. Thomas stood beside Naeli, wiping sweat from his brow, feeling a sense of accomplishment and relief. The elders inspected the work, nodding in approval. "You have shown respect and care," one elder said. This is the proper way to honor the land. Ahioke approached Thomas, his expression unreadable at first, then softening slightly. You have taken the first step in proving yourself. But remember, trust is not given once and kept forever. It must be earned each day. Continue to act with respect, humility, and understanding, and you will be accepted. Thomas nodded solemnly. I will, Chief, I promise. The village gradually returned to its usual rhythm, though the memory of the confrontation remained. Children played quietly, women continued their work, and the men repaired tools and prepared for the coming days. Nayeli moved through the village with quiet confidence, proud of her role in guiding Thomas and advocating for him. Her respect for the chief and the elders remained strong, but she also felt a quiet satisfaction in having spoken boldly and honestly. That evening, Thomas and Nayeli walked together near the edge of the desert, just beyond the village. The sky glowed with deep oranges and purples, and the air was cool, carrying the soft sounds of wind and distant wildlife. Thomas spoke first, his voice low but sincere. Nayeli, I cannot thank you enough for what you did today. You spoke for me, and it may have saved me from serious consequences. I do not know how to repay your trust. Nayeli looked at him, her eyes steady. Trust is not something given lightly, Thomas. You earned it through your actions and your willingness to learn. Respect and honesty are the greatest repayment you can give. Thomas nodded, understanding the depth of her words. I will do everything I can to honor that. I will respect your people, your land, and your traditions. I want to learn from you, not just as a visitor, but as someone who truly understands. Nayeli smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and warmth in her expression. Then continue to walk carefully, Thomas. The path is not easy, but it is worth it. Understanding comes slowly, and respect must be proven in every action every day. The two walked in silence for a while, their thoughts deep and reflective. The desert stretched endlessly around them, a vast expanse of sand, rocks, and sky. It was a land that demanded patience and resilience, qualities that both Thomas and Nayeli were learning to cultivate. As night fell, they returned to the village, where a small fire burned near the central gathering area. Villagers and elders gathered, sharing stories, preparing food, and maintaining the bonds that held the community together. Thomas joined them quietly, participating where appropriate, always mindful of the customs he had learned. Nayeli stayed close, guiding him when needed, offering subtle encouragement and ensuring he followed the proper ways. Over the next few days, Thomas's integration continued. He assisted with daily chores, helped repair tools and fences, and even learned how to identify plants and animals that were significant to the tribe. His diligence impressed many villagers, and slowly, the initial tension began to fade. Some villagers who had been wary of outsiders began to nod in acknowledgement, recognizing his effort and sincerity. Nayeli's role remained crucial. She was patient and firm, teaching him not just the practical ways of life, but also the deeper lessons, the meaning of respect, the importance of listening, and the value of community. Through her guidance, Thomas began to understand that the land and its people were interconnected, and that every action had consequences that reached far beyond immediate intentions. One afternoon, while helping repair a fence along the edge of the village, Thomas paused and looked toward the horizon. I never imagined a place could teach me so much, he said quietly. Not just about survival or work, but about life, about respect and loyalty. Nayeli smiled softly. That is the lesson of our land. It is not enough to take or to give. One must understand, listen, and act with care. Only then does true respect exist. Thomas nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle deeply in his heart. He realized that his journey was no longer just about trade or exploration. It was about growth, understanding, and forming bonds built on honesty and respect. As the sun set, painting the desert in warm hues, Thomas and Nayeli stood together quietly, watching the village prepare for nightfall. The challenges of the past days had strengthened their bond, and while obstacles remained, a sense of hope had emerged. They knew that the path ahead would test their patience, courage, and loyalty, but they also knew that together, with respect and understanding, they could face whatever came next. And so, under the vast, star-filled sky, the village rested, the land calm and unyielding, and the story continued, one of reconciliation, learning, and the careful blending of two very different worlds. The past mistakes had been addressed, trust had begun to grow, and the connection between Thomas and Nayeli had deepened, laying the foundation for the days to come. The days following Thomas's return to the village were filled with quiet learning and cautious optimism. The air was warmer now, and the desert seemed alive with movement. The birds chirping, the wind rustling through the sagebrush, and the distant howls of coyotes echoing over the hills. Thomas worked diligently alongside the villagers, repairing fences, tending to small gardens, and helping with chores. Each day, he learned more about the Apache way of life, the respect for the land, the importance of community, and the deep connection between past and present. Nayeli remained a steady presence beside him. She guided him with patience and wisdom, teaching him not only the practical skills needed to survive and contribute, but also the lessons of heart and spirit that defined her people. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day, built on mutual respect, shared experiences, and a growing understanding of one another. Yet, despite their closeness, both knew the world outside the village still carried risks. Thomas could not stay forever, and Nayeli's loyalty to her tribe remained unwavering. One morning, a messenger arrived from a neighboring village. The man rode quickly, bringing urgent news. A nearby rancher, hearing of Thomas's presence in Apache territory, had come seeking conflict, threatening to take cattle and land without permission. The villagers gathered immediately, discussing how to respond. Tension filled the air, and the elders looked to Chief Ahiok for guidance. Ahiok addressed the villagers, his voice calm but resolute. "We will not allow outsiders to bring harm to our people, but we must act wisely, not recklessly. Thomas has learned to respect our ways. Let him be a bridge, a voice of understanding, so that conflict may be avoided if possible." Thomas felt the weight of responsibility pressing on him. He had come as an outsider, and now he had a chance to prove himself not only to Nayeli and the village, but also to the neighboring settlers. He nodded firmly. "I will do everything I can to help, Chief. I will speak with them, and I will prevent unnecessary conflict." Nayeli placed a hand gently on his arm. "Remember what you have learned, Thomas. Respect, patience, and honesty are your strongest tools. Trust in what you have been taught." Thomas set out toward the neighboring ranch, carrying with him supplies and a plan. When he arrived, he found the rancher, a burly man with a harsh expression, shouting at his men and brandishing a whip. The situation was tense. One wrong word could spark violence. Thomas took a deep breath, recalling everything Nayeli and the villagers had taught him. "Please," Thomas said calmly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "I come as a friend, not as an enemy. The land you seek to claim is respected by the Apache people. They are not trying to fight you, but they ask for respect of their traditions." The rancher scoffed at first, his eyes narrowing suspiciously. "What do you know of their ways, stranger?" he demanded. Thomas met his gaze steadily. "I have lived among them, learned from them, and I speak with their trust. I ask for peace, not conflict. There is much to be gained by cooperation rather than by force." The rancher hesitated. He had expected hostility or weakness, but he did not anticipate sincerity or courage. After a long pause, he finally nodded reluctantly. "Very well. I will leave their land and take only what is allowed, but I warn you, stranger, do not fail to honor this agreement." Thomas bowed slightly, relief flooding his chest. "You will find that I speak honestly. The land and the people will be safe." He returned to the village, heart pounding with relief and a growing sense of accomplishment. When Thomas arrived back at the village, he was met with cautious smiles and approving nods. The villagers had heard of his efforts and were impressed by his courage and diplomacy. Chief Ahioke stepped forward, placing a hand on Thomas's shoulder. "You have done well. Today you have proven not only respect but wisdom. You understand the balance between strength and restraint. This is the way of true honor." Naomi approached, her eyes shining with quiet pride. "You have done exactly what I knew you could. I am proud of you, Thomas." Thomas smiled, a mixture of exhaustion and happiness in his expression. "I could not have done it without your guidance, Naomi. You taught me more than I ever imagined." As the sun began to set, painting the desert in brilliant shades of orange, pink, and purple, the village gathered around a fire to celebrate the day's success. Food was shared, stories were told, and laughter filled the air. Even the elders, who had been cautious of Thomas from the start, now nodded in approval, recognizing that he had truly earned his place, however temporary, among them. During the celebration, Naomi and Thomas found a quiet spot near the edge of the village. The stars were beginning to appear in the clear night sky, sparkling like distant fireflies. Thomas looked at Naomi, his heart full of gratitude and affection. "I have learned so much since I arrived," he said softly, "not just about your people but about life itself." "You have changed me, Naomi." Naomi smiled, a gentle warmth in her eyes. "And you have proven that a person can change when they choose to respect and understand. Your actions speak louder than words, Thomas. That is how trust is built." For a moment they stood in silence, the desert stretching endlessly around them. There was a quiet peace in the air, a sense that the world was vast yet connected by the choices people made and the bonds they formed. In the following days, life in the village returned to its steady rhythm, but with a new sense of hope and unity. Thomas continued to work alongside the villagers, learning, helping, and becoming a valued presence. Naomi remained by his side, guiding him and growing closer with each shared experience. They had both faced challenges, made difficult choices, and proven their loyalty and courage. One afternoon, as they walked together through a small grove near the village, Thomas paused. "Naomi, I know I must eventually leave this place, but I want you to know that no matter where I go, I will carry the lessons I have learned here, and my respect for you and your people will never fade." Naomi looked at him thoughtfully. "The bond we share is not easily broken, Thomas. The land and the people are part of who you are now. Even when you are far away, you will carry a piece of this place with you." Thomas smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. He realized that his journey had not only been about surviving and trading, but about understanding, learning, and connecting with a world very different from his own. He had come as an outsider and left as someone who had earned trust, respect, and friendship. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the desert, the villagers gathered for one last evening together before Thomas's planned departure. There was music, laughter, and a shared sense of achievement. The tribe celebrated not only the resolution of conflict, but also the bonds formed between their people and the young rancher who had shown courage, humility, and respect. Chief Ahioke spoke to the assembly, his voice carrying warmth and authority. "We have seen today what can be accomplished when understanding, respect, and courage are combined. Thomas Carter came as a stranger, but through his actions and honesty, he has become a friend. Let this be a lesson for all. Honor, loyalty, and wisdom are more powerful than fear or pride." Naomi and Thomas stood together, hand in hand, feeling the full weight of the journey they had shared. They had faced challenges, disagreements, and misunderstandings, yet they had emerged stronger and closer. Their bond was not just a personal connection, but a symbol of the possibility of trust and understanding between different worlds. As the night settled in, the desert grew quiet once more, filled only with the soft sounds of wind and distant animals. Thomas and Naomi looked up at the stars, their thoughts intertwined with the land, the people, and the choices that had shaped their journey. They knew the future would bring new challenges, but they also knew that together, with respect and courage, they could face whatever came next. And so, under the endless sky, the story reached its peaceful conclusion. Thomas had earned the trust of the tribe, Naeli had shown bravery and wisdom, and the village had witnessed the power of honesty, respect, and love. The desert, timeless and unyielding, remained as it had always been, a silent witness to human courage, growth, and the bonds that could form even in the most unlikely of circumstances. In the quiet moments of that night, the world seemed to hold its breath, acknowledging the journey of a young rancher and a brave Apache woman who had faced fear, misunderstanding, and tradition, and had emerged stronger, wiser, and united by respect and loyalty. The story of Thomas and Naeli became a quiet legend in the village, a reminder for generations to come that courage, honesty, and love could bridge worlds, heal misunderstandings, and create bonds that even time could not break.